Hey everybody, this is Kevin Bass from thedietwars.com. I just got done training jiu-jitsu, and I gotta say, man, it doesn't matter how hard you go in bodybuilding workouts. If you haven't done jiu-jitsu in like 3 weeks, as I have not done because I've had a busted rib, man, I rolled for about 20 minutes and I am dead. I want to go to sleep already, like 3 hours ahead of bedtime, but I'm here for you guys in order to debunk yet another Huberman post. They're getting worse and worse, honestly, because it's like, my new theory is that Huberman is not actually making these tweets. I don't think he's this dumb to write these things, but nonetheless, they're there. He has like how many followers now? He has like 250,000 followers on Twitter. He has like over 1 million on Instagram, etc. So he has the biggest reach of any influencer, probably at this point, a health influencer in North America. And yet he's spewing nonsense. So let's debunk it. Let's just read the tweet and let's talk about why it's wrong. It's really frustrating. It's like wrong in a way that's actually harmful. So he says there's nothing inherently, and it's harmful on multiple levels. He says there's nothing inherently better about intermittent fasting versus calorie restriction, except the glaring truth. Ooh, the glaring truth. Most people find it easier not to eat for a period of time than to eat small portions. It is all about dopamine. Ignoring the neural side of nutrition is a mistake. I don't even know what to say. He says, in fact, many people who do intermittent fasting come to enjoy the non-feeding phase and enjoy food more. Again, it's dopaminergic. Do as you wish and is healthiest for you, but skip the fasting versus X debates online. They miss that it's not about nutrients, it's about adherence. So let's go fact check this. What do the data say about adherence for intermittent fasting versus chronic calorie restriction? What do the actual data say? Has he actually looked this up? Because I'm aware of the extensive literature on this point. I know what the cutting edge randomized controlled trials say, and they don't say what he's saying. They don't say it. It's just like, this is actually false. Okay, let's look at the trial by Dylan Lowe et al. It was published in JAMA Internal Medicine in 2020. It's called The Effect of Time-Restricted Eating on Weight Loss and Other Metabolic Parameters in Women and Men with Overweight and Obesity. It's the largest randomized trial on time-restricted eating. It's called the TREAT randomized clinical trial. It's called TREAT. Basically, we call it TREAT, okay? And it says the question, what is the effect of time-restricted eating on weight loss and metabolic health in patients with overweight and obesity? Findings in this prospective randomized controlled trial that included 116 adults with overweight and obesity, time-restricted eating was associated with a modest decrease in weight that was not statistically different from the decrease in the control group. Time-restricted eating did not confer weight loss or cardiometabolic benefits in this study. Let's look at the way that it was designed. It's a 12-week randomized controlled trial. Men and women aged 18 to 64, body mass index of 27 to 43. It was conducted on a custom mobile study application. They received a Bluetooth scale, lived anywhere in the United States with a subset of 50 participants, with a subset of 50 participants living near San Francisco who underwent in-person testing. Okay. Overall, 116 participants were included in the study. There was a significant decrease in weight in TRE, time-restricted eating group, but no significant change in the CMT group. CMT stand for here, consistent meal timing. So basically, instead of doing time-restricted eating, they said you have to eat your meal at this time, this time, and this time. So just pay attention to your meal timing, but don't restrict the feeding window. Okay, so it's like the way they controlled for time-restricted eating is like, okay, you're still going to pay attention to your eating timing, but you're not going to restrict the window. So it's not the restriction of the window that could cause any effect. It's actually just paying attention to your eating timing. And let's compare, just see if you pay attention to your eating timing, you eat a normal range of time, and then you compare that to restricting your window. And there's no difference in the weight loss, okay? There was also a significant difference in appendicular lean mass index between groups. As to say, appendicular lean mass is like arms and legs. is some muscle on the arms and legs. Okay? So, meaning in this case, they actually lost more muscle in the time restricted eating group but there was no significant difference in weight. Okay? And there are no significant changes in any of the other secondary outcomes within or between groups. There are no differences in estimated energy between groups. And the conclusion and relevance, time restricted eating in the absence of any other interventions is not effective in weight loss, more effective in weight loss than eating throughout the day. Okay, that's an interesting finding in and of itself. TREAT was it's a classic study now that demonstrated that simply restricting your feeding window is not going to help you lose weight necessarily. And then in this case, it's an 8-hour feeding window. So it's between noon and 8 p.m. There's no difference. Okay? All right, cool. So let's look at something that's really interesting with respect to adherence, though, because this is where we're really going to get to the payoff. Let's just go to the diagrams. Beautiful. How this pops up for you guys. As you can see, the CMT, self-reported adherence protocol, CMT group, right? Over the course of this 90-day period, in this case, is a 90-day period, CMT remained around 90% adherence, CMT, whereas the adherence to TRE, time restricted eating, progressively dropped off, ending the study at about 70%. So it's about a 90% adherence versus 70%. And all they're asking is pay attention to your feeding times, and then they compared that to people who just restrict eating for an 8-hour window. And look here, there's no difference between the weight change in restricting an 8-hour window versus just paying attention to your meal times. No difference in the weight change, okay? All right, so what is that? How does that apply here? There's nothing inherently better about intermittent fasting versus calorie restriction except the glaring truth. Most people find it easier not to eat for a period of time than to eat small portions. It's all about dopamine. Ignoring the neural side of nutrition is a mistake. In fact, many people who do intermittent fasting come to enjoy the non-feeding phase and enjoy food more. Again, it's dopaminergic. Do as you wish and is healthiest for you, but skip the fasting versus exercise online. They miss it. It's not about nutrients. It's about adherence. Well, what is the adherence here, man? The adherence here to a strategy that doesn't include additional weight loss over just paying attention to what time you eat and eating at a specific time, having a consistent eating time. No benefit to weight loss, but actually you lose muscle. Most people can't do, or a larger proportion of people can't do it. About 3 out of 10 people can't do that compared to consistent eating times. They can't even do that, and it doesn't even help except to lose muscle. All right. Okay, so that's like that. That's TREAT, okay? Let's look at another study. This is published in 2021 in Nutrients. This is a post hoc analysis of another randomized controlled trial that says adherence and dietary composition during intermittent fasting versus continuous calorie restriction. Follow-up data from a randomized controlled trial in adults with overweight or obesity. This is by Penn and et al. Okay, it's published in Nutrients and it's published in 2021. It was published last year. Cool. Let's look. All right. It's quite similar. In this trial, 12-week trial, self-reported adherence was worse for ICR than CCR. ICR is intermittent calorie restriction. It's worse for intermittent calorie restriction versus chronic calorie restriction, with 71.1% versus 32.5% of the participants reporting not to or only to rarely follow the regimen to which they were assigned between weeks 50 and weeks 120. Meaning about half as many people could adhere to intermittent calorie restriction versus chronic calorie restriction. Okay, so this is another study. It's like another recent study showing the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about this review, and I'm going to name the review real quick. It's called Effectiveness of Intermittent Fasting and Time Restricted Feeding Compared to Continuous Calorie Restriction for Weight Loss. And again, this found no difference, or I shouldn't have found a difference. I haven't actually read the abstract. I've only read the part about adherence yet. Yeah. Well, because I know the literature well enough to know there's no difference. So it says, overall, the available evidence suggests that intermittent energy restriction paradigms produce equivalent weight loss when compared to chronic energy restriction, with 9 out of 11 studies reviewed showing no differences between the group in weight or body fat loss. Okay, so there's no difference. So intermittent fasting doesn't produce any difference in weight loss. And yet, Okay, let's go look at the part about adherence. Well, it's well recognized that adherence to weight loss interventions is the greatest predictor of weight loss success. Data regarding adherence and acceptability of the IMF and TRF interventions in these studies is limited and variable. In addition, studies present adherence data in variable ways, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's go look to the middle of the paragraph. It says, in a subset of participants, Trepanowski et al. Assessed dietary adherence using doubly labeled water and reported no statistically significant difference in the percent energy restriction between the ADMF, that's a intermittent fasting protocol, and CER, chronic energy restriction, by month 6 of the intervention. In other studies, self-reported adherence to fast days is variable, with the percent of potential restricted days ranging from 43% to 97% at 3 months. Studies with longer-term follow-up showed that self-reported adherence to the fast days dropped to between 21 and 40% at 1 year. So less than half of people are adhering by 1 year. And in some cases, in one study, only 1 out of 5 people were adhering by 1 year. 2 studies provided no data, blah, 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 blah. But most studies assess acceptability of the intervention via data on major adverse events and dropout rates, which are generally found not to differ between groups. However, Trepanowski et al. Reported a higher dropout rate in the intermittent fasting group, 38% versus chronic energy restriction, 29%, with more participants in the ADMF, the intermittent fasting group, reporting dissatisfaction with the diet for the reason of it, as a reason for withdrawal. Harvey et al. Reported that fewer participants in the doubly labeled water intermittent feeding group, intermittent fasting group, continue to plan to continue the diet at the end of the study compared to the chronic energy restriction group. So only about 58% plan to continue the diet versus 85% of the chronic energy restriction group. Okay, Sun-For et al. Found that the participants in the doubly labeled water intermittent fasting group reported more hunger, more adverse events, less favorable changes in diet, nutritional composition, and eating behavior, and greater measured weight regain than participants in the chronic energy restriction group. Dude, we keep going. It's like in the time-restricted feeding studies, self-reported adherence, number of days adherent to the eating window based on the diet diaries, was 62.5% and 80% in the studies by Antony et al. And Gable et al. Respectively. And then there's some other stuff with Gill and Panda, blah, blah, blah. Okay, at best, according to this paper, there seems to be maybe no difference between the intermittent fasting groups and the chronic energy restriction groups, but probably, if you look at the most rigorous studies, look at TREAT, look at other studies comparing chronic energy restriction to intermittent fasting, you find very clearly very similar amounts of weight loss and less adherence in the intermittent fasting group. Well, why does Huberman say opposite? Because he's a charlatan. He makes stuff up. He just makes things up. He's a charlatan. Huberman is a charlatan. He is an online health influencer charlatan. He constantly makes things up, and we're just going to keep going. I'm going to keep critiquing tweets. I'm going to keep going on Huberman because it's unacceptable. Like, I can get all pissed off about, say, like Peter Attia or Ronna Patrick. And by the way, I've always liked Peter Attia or Ronna Patrick as people, as humans. I've always liked them. They overplay the mechanistic data, and it's bullshit in my opinion. Sometimes it's like total bullshit. Like the autophagy stuff is bullshit in my opinion. And there's a lot of other stuff we could talk about for a long time about that. But this stuff is not even overplaying mechanistic stuff. He made this stuff up. He's making this up. He totally invented these tweets. They have nothing to do with reality. Look, and he's writing with such certainty, with such conviction that what he's saying is correct. He says, there's nothing inherently better about intermittent fasting versus calorie restriction except the glaring truth. The glaring truth? Based on what, buddy? Based on what? What glaring truth? The glaring truth. The glaring truth. Is he some sort of like religious figure talking about the glaring truth? Or is he going to talk about the fucking data? Is he going to talk about the fucking data, or are you going to talk about the glaring truth? This guy's a charlatan. Listen, accept the glaring truth. Most people find it easier not to eat for a period of time than to eat small portions. It's all about dopamine. Where the fuck does he get this from? Where the fuck does he get this from? He doesn't get this from anywhere. He's making this stuff up. Ignoring the neural side of nutrition is a mistake. It's like he's writing a political polemic. This is science. This is not a fucking political polemic. This is not a religious text. This is not some place for him to like jerk off about. Sorry, pardon my French. I'm getting heated. This is not some place for him to go around and basically like write these things that are testable through empirical methods. You can run randomized controlled trials and test these things, and we've done all this stuff. And he's like making this out to be like he's this special guru telling people the real truth. He's not using the data. This is not the truth. This is false. This is a fiction. In fact, many people who do intermittent fasting come to enjoy the non-feeding phase and enjoy food more. Again, it's dopaminergic. Do as you wish and it's healthiest for you, but skip the fasting versus X debates online. They miss that it's not about the nutrients, it's about adherence. What's about adherence, buddy? The data show it's not. The data show that intermittent fasting people, they don't adhere as well. They adhere worse. What about dopamine, bud? What about dopamine, friend? Has nothing to do with dopamine. You're making this stuff up. This guy's a charlatan. I don't know why people don't call this crap out, because he's a charlatan. This guy's a charlatan. Huberman is a charlatan. Okay, so this is going to segue to part 2, because I'm going to do another video on this. In the next video, I'm going to explain what the science of fasting comprehensively says. I'm going to explain every single part of it that's relevant, the main parts of it that are relevant, maybe half a dozen different facts that we have about intermittent fasting and what the health effects are. The time of day, the relationship to muscle gain, muscle loss, the relationship to weight, the relationship to adherence. Okay? These four basic things, and maybe something else I'm forgetting at this moment. I'm going to discuss these. And let's talk about what the segue is, though, because he actually responds to somebody with some more nonsense, and we're going to use this as a segue. But I'm not going to mention him in the next video because this is beneath contempt. This is completely beneath contempt. All right? Look, he writes, some guy asked him a question. I thought you had professed the science behind getting positive effects with fasting with smaller feeding windows. Beyond eating at a deficit or maintenance, fasting seemed to be even better for you. Okay, cool. He says, there are preliminary data on possible additional effects, but the human studies need larger sample sizes. I use intermittent fasting, but I don't want to eat early day ever and never have, because I want some caffeine, reading, and training prior to 11 a.m., then eat at 11 to 8-ish and sleep at from 10 to 5-ish. Let me be very clear about this. This is the most unhealthy way to eat possible. This is the most unhealthy way to eat possible. The most unhealthy way to implement intermittent fasting, and it does not produce better body composition or weight loss than simply eating throughout the day with consistent meal timing, as we've seen before. And the adherence is worse. And it's also going to undermine his metabolism. This actually impairs metabolism to eat this way. To eat with a late fasting window impairs metabolism. And part 2 of this series, I'm not going to mention him at all. We're not going to mention this tweet. This is going to be the conclusion of the tweet, and we're going to address all this in the next video, because I'm going to explain like why this is the worst possible way you can eat, the most unhealthy way that you can possibly eat. I'm going to explain the data behind that and why the data overwhelmingly converges on that point. And what he's doing with these tweets is he's basically communicating what he prefers as his lifestyle. It has nothing to do with the science. And in fact, this is an unhealthy way of eating and having a lifestyle in the name of health. And this is what Huberman does. And it's sad because he's got the biggest health influencer platform in the United States, and he's selling bullshit. This is total bullshit. And we'll talk about that in part 2. Okay, we'll do that tomorrow. I'll put that video out tomorrow night. We're going to put this video out tonight. Now I'm going to go to sleep because I'm freaking fried from training. And this video was me getting out all of my anger because and I also have a cold. I'm a blue belt technically. I would say in some respects I'm like a purple belt, but I'm a blue belt technically. I've been given my blue belt. But I'm not good. I think I'm a solid blue belt. My open guard is a solid like purple belt for jiu-jitsu. I'm a solid purple belt. But I trained in the gi for the first time in like months and months and months. And I've only trained in the gi like 4 or 5 times in the last 2 years. And I went up against a real purple belt. And look, he was smaller than me. And yeah, whenever I went up against him in no-gi, I smashed him. I passed his guard, no problem. But when I went up against him in the gi, I don't know how to use the gi. So this dude crushed me. And we went for 5 years of me just like trying to stay alive, like barely staying alive. And I stayed alive. I did not get submitted. But then I was gassed. And I went up against a white belt. I subbed him once. I think he subbed me 2 or 3 times. This white belt who's like been training for like 4 or 5 months because I was gassed. I was literally like breathing like hard. I was like laying there and then he would like, and then I would like barely get up and then like slap hands and then he'd go past my guard immediately. I got like a foot lock on him once, but yeah, like, so basically this video is me ranting and getting out all my anger because I just got destroyed by a white belt. And I'm going to kill him tomorrow, so it's not going to be a problem. And once I get my cardio back, because I've been out of jiu-jitsu, also the other reason I've been out of jiu-jitsu for like 3 or 4 weeks, so because for a bum rib. So yeah, I'm gonna get him next week or the week after. I'm gonna start my cardio picks up again. But yeah, so anyway, like this is ridiculous. I do not like Huberman. I don't like him at all. I don't like him as a person. Right? Like I can critique Rhonda or Peter, and I don't like their science communication sometimes, but I don't like Huberman as a person because he makes crap up. He makes things up, and he doesn't know what he's talking about here. Next video, I'm going to give you the comprehensive view on fasting, and it's going to be sweet, and it's just basically going to explain like what do we know about fasting, intermittent fasting, no hype, no bullshit. What do we not know? What are the interesting avenues to study? How can you implement it in your life? Like I implement some principles from what we get from the time-restricted feeding literature in my life to improve my metabolic function. And it's great. And I think everybody should do that. So yeah, check out that video tomorrow. For in the meantime, like, subscribe, share this video. Let people know. Let people know. People need to understand this about this man. This man is not here to give good information. This man does not do good science communication. This is garbage. This is total garbage. Okay? As a systematic rule. Okay? Like, I can be pissed off about Peter T all I want, right? But at least he has like great guests. At least he gets things right much of the time. At least he's a really compelling storyteller. At least he's been really good about lipids. He's good about cardiovascular disease. He's a fucking mensch about cardiovascular disease. He's perfect. You want to learn about cardiovascular disease, learn it from Peter for sure. And a lot of other stuff as well. I learned from Peter for sure. So whatever people I have ranted about in the past, it's cool. But like this guy, I don't like him. I don't like Huberman as a person because Peter does his best and Rhonda does her best. And like, there's a lot of other people I talk about and I slam on. I think a lot of them do their best. I think this guy's not doing his best. I think this guy's out to make money. I really do. I really think this guy's bad news. Share this video, let people know about it, like, subscribe, etc. You can find my social media, Kevin in Bass, Kevin, in 2 N's, Bass. And that's going to be at Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. If you're hearing this on my podcast at the Kevin Bass Show, you can also catch me on YouTube. Watch the videos there. Likewise, if you're hearing this on YouTube, you can just click in and plug in on the podcast, and that's going to be the Kevin Bass Show. And my Patreon account is the same thing, Kevin in Bass, 2 N's. I have a deal. If you're at the highest tier of the Patreon, it's about $100 a month. You can talk to me for 30, 45 minutes a month. and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about within the purview of the general things that I talk about. So if you want more detail about some of the things I talk about in my videos, or I talk about my blog posts over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, we can talk about that stuff. And you can have me one-on-one. I can give my opinions. It's not going to be as obviously as polished as these videos, but if you want to hear my opinions, you want to hear me go more in depth and give you like the final word on how to assess and think about the literature and how to implement it in your life in your particular situation, I can help you to do that. Of course, it's not medical advice technically. I'm just reading the literature, right? You're not a patient of mine, but I'm just reading the literature, and yeah, and that goes for this whole thing, right? None of this is medical advice, and I probably need to start putting that as a disclaimer at the beginning of the video. So, yeah, check me out, Patreon, Kevin N. Bass as well, and then also, again, my website is thedietwars.com, and you can also give me at thedietwars.com/support me, SUPPORT-me, M-E, obviously. That's where you can give me send a direct donation. You can also go on Twitter through the Cash App. There's a button that you can press there. And yeah, so please do that. Help me out, support me. I'm a poor MD PhD student, so the more help I can get, the better, and the more I can spread out the message, because it needs to be spread that, these people need to be fact checked, and people need to get the good information. So thanks for watching, and let me know what you think about the video. Peace.